My name is Dr. Lauren Mitchell. I'm 33. And 2 days ago, I pulled into the gravel drive of the Whitmore estate in Savannah, Georgia. Alone. Again. The sky was threatening rain, but the real storm had been brewing since the moment my sister Madison asked me to be her maid of honor. I stepped out of my hybrid silver sensible paid-off, just as a valet in crisp white gloves scanned the front seat. No companion. No tuxedoed fiancé. Just me, a navy dress in the back seat, and a bag with 3 backup pairs of shoes, none of which cost what the bridesmaids' mani-pedis did. I heard someone nearby mutter the doctor, I think before I even reached the steps. And I knew they already knew. Before I can continue my story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Madison always had that draw, that charm. Even growing up, she walked into rooms like she'd been expected while I checked if anyone had noticed. We shared a bathroom, but not a world. My world had always been dissecting frog hearts, memorizing trauma flowcharts, staying up past midnight to map arteries on flashcards while she tried on lipstick in our reflection. People think we're close, and in a way we are. But there's love and then there's proximity, not the same thing. This wedding was her dream, a southern fairy tale spun in layers of lace and old money. I was the academic footnote in her Vogue-style announcement, the maid of honor with no date. Madison's fiancé, Carter Whitmore, came from generations of bankers, judges, and legacy league charm. The kind of family that serves bourbon with breakfast and thinks asking what hospital I work at is equivalent to discussing their foundation's latest gala. At the entrance, a woman in a navy dress suit held a digital tablet. Name Dr. Lauren Mitchell, I said, not correcting her when she didn't catch the title. She tapped quickly, looked up. Oh, you're in the Gardenia suite, and your guest is… No guest. Her lips parted like a subtle wince. Right. We'll need to inform the kitchen. Seating's arranged by pairs. Her tone said you just messed up my spreadsheet and my worldview. Sorry about that, I said, though. I had no reason to be. Madison rushed in not long after I unpacked glowing, breathless, all-blonde curls and designer perfume. I'm so glad you came, she said, and I believed her. I really did, but I also saw the flicker in her eyes as she scanned the room for someone, anyone beside me. You look great, I told her. So do you, she said the way someone says it when they're trying not to say, why didn't you bring anyone? The truth, I didn't want to fake it. I'd rather be alone than pretend. But I underestimated how loudly solitude echoes in rooms built for pairs. The Whitmore estate looked like a movie set the kind where no one ever trips or cries or shows up alone. Oak trees draped with Spanish moss stood like guardians over a driveway, long enough to have its own zip code. The main house, white brick, massive porch columns, wedding magazine ready, was already buzzing with florists, servers, photographers. I clutched my garment bag like armor. Inside, everything smelled of rosewater and wealth. The halls were lined with oil paintings, all people with the same angular cheekbones and sun-wrinkled pride. The Whitmores didn't just have money. They had generations of being rich, which is somehow worse. People like that don't say you're not good enough. They imply it. In their tone and the glance they exchange when you mention working 80-hour weeks in a hospital. The way they say doctor like it's a charming eccentricity instead of an earned title. Dinner that night was at the Carriage House, a rehearsal dinner in name only. More like a prelude to a coronation. Long tables set with Waterford crystal, candlelight flickering against champagne towers, a jazz trio playing just loud enough to muffle the whispers. I was seated at the cousins' table, though I was no one's cousin. Just a placeholder. A mistake in the seating chart someone forgot to fix. Victoria Whitmore found me before dessert. Lauren isn't it? She asked, extending a manicured hand that smelled of bergamot and generational wealth. Yes, ma'am. You work at a hospital, St. Joseph's Medical Center. Trauma surgery. She smiled tightly. That must be intense. It is. Well, she said, eyes scanning the room. I do hope you'll find time to enjoy the celebration. It's such a shame to come alone. These things can feel so isolating. I bit my cheek. I'm happy to be here for Madison. Of course. She tilted her head. We're all just thrilled you could make it. It was a masterclass in passive aggression. By the time I made it to the powder room, my hands were trembling, and I wasn't even sure why. Maybe it was the way the other bridesmaids clinked glasses and whispered about bachelorette weekends in Napa. Or maybe it was knowing that every pair of eyes that slid over me saw not success, not sacrifice, but absence. The absence of a man on my arm, of a ring on my finger, of a storyline they understood. I touched up my lipstick and practiced a smile that said, "I'm fine." I'd used that smile in the OR 1,000 times before cracking open someone's chest. But tonight it felt heavier, less convincing. On the way back, I passed Carter's cousin Brooke by the dessert table. "The doctor," she said, eyebrows raised, nudging the man beside her. "Told you she came alone." He chuckled. "Bet she's married to her job. Or just not very good at small talk." I didn't stop walking. I didn't flinch. But something in me curled inward, coiled tight, like a suture pulled too hard. I didn't expect warmth. I didn't come here for it. But I hadn't prepared for this cold. The morning after the rehearsal dinner, my phone lit up with a message from my mom. Just checking, still no date, followed by a thumbs-up emoji like she was being playful, not performative. I didn't reply. This wasn't the first time my solo status had become family conversation. At my cousin Rachel's wedding last summer, I was seated between an empty chair and the coat rack. Someone's grandmother asked if I was taking a break from men. I'd smiled politely, said, "Actually, I'm a trauma surgeon," and she nodded, like I just told her I worked at a dry cleaner. In my family, a woman without a man is a problem to solve, not a person to celebrate. I wasn't Lauren Youngest attending surgeon in St. Joseph's trauma wing. I was Lauren Sweetgirl, but Madison, to her credit, tried to bridge the worlds. "I told them you're incredibly busy," she'd said during one of our calls. "That it's hard meeting someone when you're literally elbow deep in people's chests." "Thanks for that visual," I said. She laughed. "You know what I mean. I did. She meant I tried to defend you, but they still don't get it." The night before the wedding, I tried to settle in early, hoping to recharge. But the pressure kept me awake. I kept imagining myself on display again, one of those awkward people you see at weddings, and wonder if they even like joy. I hated that I might become that person. The sullen one, the loner, the anomaly. I thought about the setups friends had offered over the past few months. Ethan from anesthesiology, that dermatologist my mom met at a fundraiser, even a nurse who swore her ex was emotionally mature now. I'd gone on a few dates, some nice, one even sweet, but none who could sit across from me in a trauma bay, blood soaking through my scrubs, and understand that that was a part of me, that it wasn't just a job. It was the thing that kept me breathing. I laid out my pale blue bridesmaid dress on the bed. Silk, backless, elegant. Madison had picked it out herself. "You'll look amazing in it," she said, "and you won't have to worry about anyone matching you." There it was again, the silent asterisk. No one to match, no one to coordinate with. The next morning, the event planner stopped me in the hallway. "Dr. Mitchell, we'll need to adjust the front table since you're unaccompanied." I figured, I said. She tried to smile. "Don't worry, we've put you with some of the extended family other singles." "The kids' table," I murmured. She blinked. "Excuse me, never mind." By the time we gathered for wedding prep, I had accepted it. I would be the solo act, the seat filler, the doctor who could resuscitate strangers, but couldn't apparently manage a +1. Still, I promised myself no tears, no flinching. I would stand tall in that silk dress toast my sister and pretend the wine didn't taste like pity. The rehearsal dinner had been sharp around the edges, but the wedding morning started off soft. Too soft, like the calm before a code blue. The bridal suite smelled of mimosa foam and heated curling irons. There were satin robes, embroidered initials, laughter that didn't quite reach my corner of the room. I sat at the makeup table while a stylist curled Madison's hair with the precision of a pastry chef. She looked radiant naturally, always had. Even in middle school, when I was still figuring out conditioner and braces, Madison already understood which angles made her look like someone in a commercial for iced tea. "You okay?" she asked, catching me in the mirror. "I'm good. You're being quiet. I'm always quiet in the mornings. You're always quiet around my friends," she said lightly, but it stuck. I adjusted the strap on my bridesmaid dress. The silk clung in places I wasn't sure it was supposed to, elegant and unforgiving. I felt like a walking sculpture, admired from afar, hard to touch. At least in the OR, I got to wear scrubs. Scrubs made sense. Someone's phone played "This Will Be an Everlasting Love," and the room dissolved into a collective awe. It wasn't ironic. These girls really believed in forever. I wanted to too, I think. But I'd seen the insides of people who believed in forever, and the aftermath when forever cracked. It was around noon when I stepped outside to breathe my heels crunching on the gravel path. That's when I heard them, two voices, one female, one male, drifting from behind the floral arch where final touches were being made. I mean, she's a surgeon, but why is she always alone? Maybe she prefers textbooks to people. Maybe she's just bad at people. The woman laughed, Brooke's voice unmistakable. My stomach tightened. I stayed frozen in place. She looked so stiff at dinner, the man added. Did you see her shoes? Definitely orthopedic. Oh, God, Brooke snorted. She probably chose them based on arch support, not style. I didn't move. Not even to inhale. I thought of every moment I'd ever pushed through exhaustion to save someone's life every 2 a.m., call every hand I held as the line went flat, and how none of it mattered to these people. I wasn't a woman to them. I was a type. Then the florist's assistant turned the corner and caught me standing there, and her eyes went wide like I'd heard everything. Because I had. Back in the suite, Madison was fussing over a smudge on her veil. She glanced at me, but didn't ask. Maybe she saw the storm in my face. Maybe she didn't want to add it to her list of bridal problems. I helped her with the veil, adjusted the bobby pins, smoothed the lace. My hands were steady, they always are. But something inside me had cracked quietly, a hairline fracture from the weight of invisible judgment. Not enough to break me, but enough to leave a bruise no one could see. There's a particular silence that comes with walking down an aisle alone, while everyone else walks in pairs. It's not loud, it's not cruel, it just is. Like gravity or humidity, unavoidable and woven into the air. That was the kind of silence that wrapped around me as I stepped between the rows of white chairs, silk dress catching the breeze, and eyes following my every move like I was a glitch in the choreography. I focused on the floral arch ahead, the same one that had earlier hidden whispers like knives. Each step felt heavier than the last, not because I wasn't proud to be there for Madison, but because I suddenly felt like I was wearing someone else's life, like a borrowed identity that didn't quite fit. I was the successful sister, the impressive one on paper, but here I was, a problem no one knew how to seat. Carter stood at the altar, with that smug confidence men like him are born with. Madison floated toward him like a breeze in chiffon. She looked stunning, absolutely luminous, the kind of beautiful that makes you ache a little just watching it. I watched her hug our dad before stepping into a future made of gold-plated dinner parties and monogrammed towels. And I loved her fiercely, even as I felt more and more like a ghost hovering at the edge of the frame. The ceremony was short and beautiful. Vows, rings, kiss. The usual. But even during the laughter and applause, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd been cast as an extra in someone else's epic love story. A witness, not a participant. A perfectly applied layer of foundation for someone else's glow. At the reception tent, a string quartet played something elegant and forgettable. I slipped into my designated seat again, one of the only unpaired guests at the head table, and unfolded the linen napkin onto my lap. My name was printed on a small card in looping gold script next to an empty space labeled guest. A space that stayed empty, a space everyone noticed. The first few toasts rolled out. Laughter, clinking glasses, photogenic kisses. Madison's college roommate shared a story about freshman year and red Solo cups. Carter's brother told an unfunny anecdote about a ski trip. Everyone laughed anyway. I looked down the table, realizing just how far removed I was from this world. I lived in a different reality, one where I didn't have the luxury of choosing between Paris and Positano for a honeymoon, but instead between two ER patients bleeding out at the same time. A young server appeared with a silver tray and leaned down. "Would you like more champagne, Dr. Mitchell?" The title caught me off guard. I nodded, surprised. He smiled. "My sister's studying pre-med, wants to do trauma." You're kind of a legend at St. Joe's." For a moment, I felt seen. Then I heard Brooke's voice again, 2 tables over. "Of course she's a legend. She's had so much time to focus on her career. You know, without distractions like family relationships, life." That one stung harder than it should have. Not because it was true, but because I'd spent years wondering if maybe I had missed something important while chasing the next successful surgery, the next peer-reviewed paper. But I hadn't missed it. I just hadn't forced it. And that to them was a flaw. After the ceremony, the cocktail hour spilled across the lawn like a magazine spread champagne flutes, jazz trio, oyster bar, under a pergola wrapped in fairy lights. Everywhere I turned, people paired off like they were auditioning for engagement shoots, the kind of glittering curated life that filters could only dream of. And me, I was standing next to a heat lamp swirling seltzer in a glass, trying not to sweat through silk. I'd thought about leaving then, just slipping out, saying I got a call from the hospital, emergency consult, totally believable, totally on brand. But I couldn't. Because even with all the shade-throwing and side-eyes, I loved Madison. She deserved her perfect day, and I wouldn't be the one to stain it with drama. So I stayed perched on the edge of conversations like an extra place setting no one knew what to do with. "Hey, Doc." Carter's brother approached tie-loosened drink in hand. "Saw you walking down the aisle solo. Gotta say, bold move." "Didn't realize it was bold to have no date," I said, not smiling. He raised an eyebrow. "Well, everyone's thinking it. I mean, look at this crowd. You really couldn't find anyone." I stared at him, deadpan. "I could have brought someone, but I figured why make 2 people uncomfortable?" He blinked. "Damn. All right then." And wandered off. Somewhere behind me, a woman whispered, "That's the surgeon's sister. She's the reason they couldn't get the floral arch until Friday." As if Madison's wedding planner had to rearrange deliveries because I couldn't get a boyfriend. Eventually, we were ushered into the main tent. Chandeliers, gold-rimmed glassware, a dance floor so polished it could have doubled as an operating table. The seating chart placed me at the head table, again alone on one side, with the bridal party couples flanking me like mirrored perfection. Madison floated past in a dress that moved like a sigh. Having fun, she asked a little too cheerily. "It's beautiful," I replied. "I just wish, I don't know. I wish you didn't have to do this all alone." "I'm fine," I lied. "I just wanted you to feel included," she said. "I know Carter's family can be—" She hesitated. "Traditional." "Traditional's a word for it," I said, and for a second she smiled. We shared something then, a flash of honesty. But it passed. The band began their first set. Couples flooded the floor. Victoria Whitmore gave a speech that included the phrase, "real Southern values," which I suspected excluded women like me. A second course was served. Then toasts began again. I clapped at all the right moments, sipped my wine, laughed when appropriate. But I never stopped feeling the distance. At some point, I caught Madison's gaze across the tent. She looked worried. Not about me specifically, but the idea of me. The way my solitude reflected against all her curated joy. And honestly, I couldn't blame her. I wasn't the storybook bridesmaid. I wasn't the kind of person who fit easily into photo collages. I was the background noise, respected, tolerated, but fundamentally outside. Still, I stayed. Because I loved her. Because I knew she didn't fully understand, and maybe never would. And because sometimes showing up is the most radical thing you can do when you know you weren't invited to belong. By the time the cake had been wheeled in, I was so emotionally threadbare that even the frosting looked judgmental. I don't know when the switch flipped, maybe it was the third wine refill from the too nice server, or the moment I realized I'd memorized the chandeliers just to avoid eye contact. But somewhere between the champagne toast and the bouquet toss, I started rehearsing my exit. It was simple. Go outside, message Madison something sweet, drive home, maybe stop at Waffle House. A perfect solo exit. Clean. I slipped out during the third dance set. No one noticed. Or if they did, no one stopped me. The air outside was warm, humid, thick with magnolia, and layered music that sounded hollow now. I found a stone bench near the rose garden. My dress rustled as I sat stiff against the night. My phone buzzed one of the residents from the trauma wing. "Can you cover Sunday night? Jenkins has the flu." I almost laughed. Of course Jenkins had the flu. Of course, the hospital needed me, and for a second it felt like a lifeline. But I didn't respond. Instead, I sat there holding a champagne flute someone had handed me earlier, the bubbles long gone, the sweetness turned flat. In the distance, laughter burst from the tent like a firecracker. Madison's laugh high sincere. I smiled without meaning to. She was happy. That mattered. Still, it stung. Not just being alone here, being surrounded by people who saw my soloness as evidence of failure instead of design. Footsteps on gravel broke the moment. I didn't look up. "You're not much of a party person, huh?" I turned. Walter Whitmore Carter's grandfather stood a few feet away, leaning slightly on a wooden cane. His tuxedo hung just a bit loose on his frame, but he carried himself with quiet command. "Not really," I replied instantly, aware of the tear stain I hadn't noticed drying at my temple. "I used to hate these things," he said, sitting slowly beside me. "Too many opinions. Not enough honesty." I nodded, unsure what else to offer. "You're Lauren Wright, the doctor." I nodded again. He didn't fill the silence, just let it sit. For once, someone wasn't trying to fix me or poke at me. He just sat. "My granddaughter Lily," he said suddenly, eyes on the dark lawn, "was in a car accident this past January. I thought we'd lose her." I froze. I remembered a Lily. 18. Blunt trauma, internal bleeding, ruptured liver. A snowstorm night. We worked for hours. I'd made a split-second call to open her abdomen before imaging. It saved her life. "I remember," I said quietly. "She was one of the worst cases I've seen in years." He turned his head, studied me. "She doesn't remember much, but she remembers someone saying, 'Hold on, don't go, I've got you.'" My throat tightened. I remembered saying that. Not for her. For me. Because when you're cracking a ribcage open in the middle of a power outage, you have to believe your words can anchor someone to the world. Walter set his glass down on the bench between us. "She wouldn't be at this wedding today if it weren't for you." I didn't speak. I couldn't. The lump in my throat was a brick. He stood slowly, adjusted his cufflinks, and said, "You belong here more than most of them do." Then he walked away. I sat there a while longer, surrounded by roses and moonlight, and the echo of a single sentence that shifted the entire weight of the evening. "You belong here." I had just stood to return to the tent when I heard the music stop. Not fade, not shift. Stop. The kind of abrupt silence that makes people lift their heads in unison like something broke. Then I heard Walter Whitmore's voice. Not loud, but clear. Stronger than you'd expect from a man his age. He was standing near the main table, glass-raised cane, steady eyes scanning the crowd like he was calling court to order. "If I may," he began, "I'd like to say a few words about someone who almost left early tonight." I froze mid-step, still in the garden's shadow. He didn't say my name, not at first. He didn't need to. Every syllable folded inward toward me like a wave. "Most of you know my granddaughter Lily," Walter said. "Some of you know that earlier this year she was in a catastrophic accident. Car flipped on Highway 17. Snow ice medics stuck behind stalled traffic. By the time she reached St. Joseph's, she was circling the drain." People murmured. Even the band had stopped tuning. This wasn't the kind of speech you expected between cake and dancing. They told me she had less than a 10% chance, he continued. But there was one person who didn't accept that. A surgeon. A stranger who'd never met Lily. Who worked through 12 hours of chaos and made choices that brought her back to us. He looked around, eyes locking with mine across the distance. "That surgeon is standing here tonight," he said. "Alone, yes. But not unknown, not unnoticed, and certainly not unworthy." The air in the tent shifted. People turned in their seats. Wine glasses paused mid-sip. Laughter died on polite tongues. Walter turned toward me and did something I will never forget, not even when I'm 80 myself. He bowed. Not a nod, not a tilt of respect. A bow. His hand on his chest, his back curved, and the weight of old bones didn't stop him from making a gesture so simple it shook me more than any insult ever could. "This woman," he said, "saved my family. And some of you," his voice sharpened, "have spent the weekend mocking her because she arrived without an escort." As if that somehow made her less. No one dared speak. "If arriving alone is the price of saving lives," he said, "then I suggest we all sit down and reconsider our damn priorities." And with that, he straightened, nodded once to the stunned crowd, and returned to his seat, as if he'd just made a casual toast. Madison was crying. Victoria Whitmore was pale. Brooke and Hunter looked like they wanted to disappear beneath the linen-draped tables. I didn't move. Couldn't. The gravity of what just happened hadn't caught up to my legs yet. Then Lily, sweet quiet Lily, stood up too. She crossed the tent heels, clicking like punctuation, and stopped in front of me with tear-glossed eyes. I didn't know, she said. I never saw your face. But I remember your voice. You told me not to let go. I nodded, too full to speak. She hugged me, tight. No hesitation. A full "you saved my life" hug. People clapped, genuinely, not out of politeness, out of awe. And just like that, all the whispers and glances and table assignments melted into something small, insignificant, because someone had seen me, and they hadn't looked away. After Walter sat down and the applause finally faded, there was a strange kind of hush that took over the tent, less like silence, more like recalibration. As if everyone had to rewire their understanding of me in real time. The woman they'd politely ignored, sidestepped, or pitied had just been framed as the anchor to their own story's continuation. Not background, not asterisks, foundation. I walked slowly back toward the reception, my hands trembling in a way they never did in surgery. Not from fear, but from something more intimate being witnessed fully. Not through the lens of what I lacked, but for what I was. What I'd done. Madison met me halfway, mascara smudged, breath hitching. Lauren, she said, voice cracking. Why didn't you tell anyone? I didn't know it was Lily, I said softly. And even if I had, it's not how this works. You don't show up to a wedding with a resume. She nodded, laughing a little. I'm such an idiot. I let them talk about you like you were some sad, broken extra in my big day. You didn't stop them, I said. Not cruelly, just the truth. Her shoulders slumped. No, I didn't. And I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry. I didn't say it was okay. Because it wasn't. But I saw her face, my sister's face, and knew she meant it. And maybe that was enough. Victoria approached next. Her steps were hesitant, her perfect posture slightly cracked. Dr. Mitchell, she said, swallowing the title like it hurt her teeth. Please accept my apology. I misjudged you. I looked at her. You judged me perfectly, just not completely. She blinked. That's fair. Brooke followed behind, dragging Hunter like a guilty golden retriever. I'm sorry, she blurted. About earlier, we didn't know. You didn't ask, I corrected. Hunter nodded quickly. We were wrong. We know that. I know, I said. And for the record, the shoes are orthopedic. I stand for 16 hours a day. Brooke laughed, awkward but real. Yeah, well, they're working for you. As the night stretched on, people began to approach me one by one. A server whose cousin was in nursing school. A guest who'd lost her husband to sepsis and thanked me anyway. A groomsman who just wanted to say he'd never met a surgeon before. That last part made me smile. Even Carter finally cornered me by the champagne tower. Lauren, he said, looking dazed. I'm stunned. I shrugged. Same. I mean, you saved Lily, and you didn't say a word. Would it have mattered if I had? I asked him. Would your family have heard me? He looked down ashamed. No, probably not. I nodded. That was all the closure I needed from him. By the time I sat back down at the head table, now shifted, rebalanced my empty seat, replaced by Lily's beside me, I didn't feel alone anymore, not because I'd magically become the life of the party, but because the parts of me that had been invisible, my competence, my sacrifice, my truth, had finally been illuminated, and that filled the space beside me better than any date ever could. The band played its final set with a softness that felt earned, no longer performing for pretense, but for people who had seen something that night, something raw, something real. The once rigid social choreography of the reception loosened. Laughter didn't sound rehearsed anymore. Eyes met mine without flinching. As the last song faded into the soft murmur of tired feet and contented sighs, Walter Whitmore found me again. He held out his hand. May I, he asked with that quiet nobility that doesn't ask for attention, only respect. I thought I'd sworn off dancing at weddings, I smiled. Occupational hazard. I thought I'd sworn off apologies, he replied. But here we are. We change. I took his hand. We danced. Slowly, carefully, his grip light, but sure, my heels clicking against the polished floor like metronomes. Around us, other guests watch, not intrusively, but reverently. This was no pity dance. This was recognition. He leaned in close voice, warm but firm. You have a legacy, Lauren, one you've built not through who you marry or who you impress, but who you save. I blinked fast. I didn't expect this weekend to go like this. No one does, he said. The people who need to be seen the most often arrive unannounced. When the song ended, he kissed my knuckles like something out of a black and white film. And in that moment, I saw him for what he was, not just the patriarch of a storied family, but a man who understood quiet power. The kind that doesn't need noise to exist. Madison found me near the entrance as guests started drifting toward the valet stand. Please don't leave without saying goodbye, she said. I wouldn't, I told her. She wrapped her arms around me tighter than she had all weekend. Promise you'll come visit. We'll have a room for you anytime. And not because you saved Lily, just because I miss you. I nodded. I'll come. But next time you're coming to my world. Trauma wing, 3 a.m. shift. Let's see how you handle real blood. She laughed. Deal. As I walked toward my car, the gravel crunching under my flats. Yes, I had changed out of the heels. My phone buzzed again. Jenkins was still sick. The trauma floor needed coverage. I smiled and replied, I'm on my way. The drive back to the city was quiet. No music. Just the hum of the road and the weight of everything that had shifted in the span of a weekend. I hadn't found a date. I hadn't flirted with a radiologist or caught a bouquet like a scene out of a Hallmark movie. But I'd been seen, understood, and named. Not as a +1, but as a person who mattered. And that filled every seat in my car. We don't always get the validation we crave from the people we expect it from. But sometimes it comes from the one voice we never imagined would speak. That weekend, I didn't win anyone over with charm or wit or perfectly winged eyeliner. I just showed up. And in doing so, I was reminded that showing up alone can be an act of power. Because worth isn't handed to us. It's lived, proven, protected. Have you ever felt out of place in a room full of people who had it all? I want to hear your story. Drop it in the comments. Let's make this a place for real talk, not highlight reels. If this story resonated, take a moment to like, subscribe, and maybe send it to someone who needs to feel seen tonight. Keep showing up for yourself. Your life doesn't have to look like theirs to be meaningful.